My next speaker is deservedly regarded as one of the best-loved Liberals of all time. I wouldn't dare to inquire as to her age, but it seems to me that her strength of purpose, her quiet conviction, and her ability to destroy the opposition with a few well-chosen words, particularly on question time, gets better as time goes on. So we are truly honoured to have her here tonight to speak to us. Baroness Shirley Williams, everyone!
First of all, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me say that it's wonderful to see Birmingham in such hugely good heart. Last week I went to 3 of the great cities of Britain, which are now, today, dominated and led by the Liberal Democrats. Newcastle, Sheffield, Liverpool. And in those 3 cases, as will be true of Birmingham after this election, we saw not only the renaissance of the great city, but the recovery of a desire to innovate, to come up with true reform, to show what citizens can do if they're given their heads and allowed to do it. And that's what you will do in Birmingham. And it would be right that the second great city of England should become a Liberal Democrat city and join the others that are now part of this pioneering movement. I want also to say to our candidates, good hunting, good campaigning and good luck, because you are a great credit to your city, and it would be lovely to have your great city represented by you. Paddy, when he was talking just now about the 2 crises that we face, talked about them in terms, I think, that show how deeply significant they are. And I want to say just a word or two about something that is central to the Liberal Democrats, central to their leader Nick Clegg, and central to all Liberal Democrat activists and MPs. And that is the passion for a more just society, a fairer society. Let me just say for a moment that one of the things that I find very puzzling is that some of the things which we should feel seems to have gone quite quiet in recent years. Maybe because we have had the opportunity to share out the goodies among ourselves. Why are we not furious when we see thousands upon thousands of boarded up homes, which will be able to be brought back into the housing pool with expenditure in many cases of less than £10,000? Why are we not furious when we see some children struggling to gain opportunity of education because the classes are too big, or because they happen to be the unlucky ones who didn't get a school that was set up to be sponsored by somebody well off enough to be able to pump money into it? Why are we not furious when we look at the scale of the bankers' bonuses and side by side with that start taxing people in this country when they're only just above the benefit level? Why are we not furious when we see old people staying in bed because they can't afford to get out in this cold winter in order to keep their warmth going? We've lost the capacity for indignation, and I think it's important that we recover it, because what is happening to our country, in my mind anyway, is deeply troubling. When I first became a Member of Parliament, the difference between what those who were in the top senior management earned in companies and the average pay of those who worked in those companies was 9 to 1. Today, for the senior management in big companies, the gap is as much as 70 or 80 to 1. And we are not anything like as angry as we should be about the way in which we've seen in the case of the banking crisis, the Conservatives trying to pretend it's entirely the fault of the Labour Party and nothing whatsoever to do with deregulation. And on the Labour side, an attempt to suggest that somehow they got it all right and didn't take part as they did in trying to make the city a bigger and bigger share of our economy, and in trying to stop, effectively, people dealing with the excesses that were before them. We now live in a deeply unfair society. One of the things we know about an unfair society is it does not create the kind of good society that one would like to see. Deeply unequal societies are not societies which produce democracy, or which produce a society with a very strong sense of a commonality, of common good, of all the things that bring us together. But there's another thing as well that I think needs saying. Paddy referred to the fact that we don't just live in our own country, we are now significantly part of the world. We live in a globalised world. Many Liberal Democrats, many of you in this hall, will have walked and marched and demonstrated in order to try to achieve those famous Millennium Goals set in the year 2000. The goals of primary education, the goals of public health, the goals of enough food for the children in the developing world. We are going to fall short, fellow Liberal Democrats, by $20 billion in meeting the Millennium Goals 10 years after they were set. We are falling far behind in terms of the very things that we wanted to see, that we believed in, that we fought for. That $20 billion shortfall compares this year with the fact that Wall Street will make a $60 billion profit. We simply cannot go on with a world which turns its back on those most in need and those whose needs most have to be met. We have to become a just and fair society. The last thing I want to say is a word about the political crisis, and I agree with Paddy, it isn't just a crisis about a small handful of MPs who are now sitting, and rightly so, in front of the courts. It's about the passivity, the disappointment of our Parliament, the control by an overmighty executive, the sucking away of power from the people on the ground who could use it to great effect. That political crisis cannot just be met by a little fiddling and tightening up here and there. It is, as he said, a political crisis that demands from us a huge new wave of reform, a willingness to rebuild our society, and not least representative democracy. Liberal Democrats have long been the bearers of the standards of a representative democracy. We've always believed in it. We believed in a fair electoral system. We believed in a fair system of voting and a fair system of accepting the way in which people present themselves without buying elections through the expenditure of huge amounts of money. We are called upon now, fellow Liberal Democrats, to stand up for that, to bring a deeply distrustful society around to realising what we can do. And I think a great deal more than you ever realised now depends upon the battle that you put up in these forthcoming crucial few weeks. I wish you well. I wish all of us well. And I know how much all of us depend upon what you can do. Thank you for listening.